Max English Podcast.
Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to talk about a revolution, but not the kind with muskets and cannons, at least not usually. We are talking about the longest revolution in modern history.
The longest? That is a bold claim.
I stand by it. We're talking about the fight for women's suffrage, the right to vote. It's a battle that spanned nearly a century, crossed oceans, and involved everything from tea parties to bomb making.
You know, every time we talk about this, I feel like I have to unlearn what I was taught in elementary school. I have this mental image of very polite ladies in white dresses holding signs, and then the government just giving in.
The Mary Poppins version of history. Sister Suffragette.
Exactly, Mrs. Banks singing in the hallway. But the reality was a lot darker, wasn't it?
Much darker. It was a war. And before we get to the battles, we have to understand the battlefield. To understand why women were fighting so hard, you have to understand their legal status in the 19th century.
I've heard the term cult of domesticity before.
Right, that was the social vibe, but legally it was called coverture.
Coverture. What does that mean exactly?
It means that when a woman got married, her legal identity was covered by her husband. Essentially, she suffered civil death. She couldn't own property, she couldn't keep her own wages, she couldn't sign a contract, and she couldn't sue in court. She was, legally speaking, invisible.
So she wasn't just a second-class citizen. She wasn't a citizen at all.
She was property. There is a famous quote from Blackstone's Commentaries, The Basis of English Law, that says, "The husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage."
The husband and wife are one person, and that person is the husband.
Exactly. So when these women started asking for the vote, they weren't just asking to tick a box on a ballot. They were asking to be resurrected from the dead. They were asking to exist.
So how do you break out of a legal grave? Where does it start?
In the U.S., the spark actually comes from another movement entirely, the abolitionist movement, the fight to end slavery.
That makes sense. If you are fighting for human rights, you start thinking about your own rights, too.
Precisely. In 1840, two women, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, traveled all the way to London for the World Anti-Slavery Convention. They were delegates. They were ready to work.
And let me guess, the men welcomed them with open arms.
If only. The men at the convention voted to ban women from participating. They forced Mott and Stanton to sit in the balcony behind a curtain and just listen. They couldn't speak. They couldn't vote.
The irony is painful. They're at a convention to end slavery, and they're being silenced because of their gender.
That was the radicalizing moment. Stanton and Mott walked out of there and basically said, okay, once we're done fighting slavery, we need to hold a convention for us.
And not became Seneca Falls.
1848, upstate New York. They drafted the Declaration of Sentiments. It was a genius move. They took the Declaration of Independence and just edited it.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal.
Boom. But here's the tension. Stanton listed a bunch of grievances. Property rights, divorce laws, education, and then she added Resolution 9, the right to vote.
And that was the controversial one.
It was the nuclear option. Even her husband, Henry Stanton, who was a pretty progressive guy, told her, "Lizzie, if you do this, you will turn the proceedings into a farce." He actually left town so he wouldn't be associated with it.
Wow, so asking for the vote was seen as crazier than asking for property rights.
Yes, because voting implies power. Property is just stuff. Voting is sovereignty. It took Frederick Douglass, the famous Black abolitionist, to save the day.
I love that he was there.
He was the only African-American attendee. He stood up and gave a speech saying that the vote was the guarantor of all rights. He convinced the room, The resolution passed by a narrow margin.
So 1848, the flag is planted. But then the Civil War happens.
Right. The country rips itself apart. The women's movement basically presses pause to support the war effort and the end of slavery. They formed the Women's Loyal National League. They gathered 400,000 signatures to abolish slavery.
They paid their dues. They thought, okay, we helped save the Union. Now it's our turn.
And that brings us to the Great Betrayal.
The Great Betrayal. That sounds dramatic.
It was heartbreaking. After the war, the 15th Amendment is proposed. It says you can't deny the vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. But it doesn't say sex.
No. And the women suffragists, Stanton and Anthony, begged the politicians to add the word sex. They said, this is the moment for universal suffrage.
And the politicians said, this is the Negro's hour. They were terrified that if they added women to the bill, it would fail completely. So they threw the women under the bus.
And this caused a massive rift in the movement, didn't it?
It shattered it. Stanton and Anthony were furious. They refused to support the 15th Amendment. And we have to be honest here. They used some really ugly racist arguments. They asked why ignorant men should get the vote before educated white women.
That is a stain on their legacy.
It is. Meanwhile, another group, led by Lucy Stone, said, we support the 15th Amendment, we're happy for black men, we'll get ours next. So you had two rival organizations fighting each other for 20 years.
While the East Coast is fighting, wasn't something interesting happening out west?
Yes, this is the plot twist. While New York and Boston were arguing, the territory of Wyoming just gave women the vote.
Wyoming? Why Wyoming?
1869. It was the Wild West. There were very few women there. The ratio of men to women was like 6-1. The men in charge thought, hey, if we give women the vote, maybe more women will move here.
So it was a marketing stunt.
Partly, and partly it was just the frontier mentality. Everyone worked the ranch. Everyone had a gun. The gender roles were a bit more fluid because survival was the priority.
So Wyoming is the equality state.
They stuck to their guns, too. When Wyoming applied for statehood later, the U.S. Congress said, you can join, but you have to revoke that women's voting thing. And the Wyoming legislature sent a telegram back saying, we will remain out of the Union 100 years rather than come in without our women.
That is incredibly badass.
Right? So the West started falling like dominoes. Utah, Colorado, Idaho. But the East was stubborn.
So the American movement is grinding along slowly, but across the Atlantic, things were getting explosive.
The British movement is where the action movie starts. In the early 1900s, British women were tired of being polite. They had been writing letters for 40 years and getting nowhere.
Then enter the Pankhursts.
Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughters. They founded the WSPU. Their motto was deeds, not words. They decided that since the law didn't respect them, they wouldn't respect the law.
We mentioned earlier that they were militant, but give us some examples. How far did they go?
They weren't very far. They organized window smashing campaigns. Hundreds of well-dressed women would walk down Oxford Street, pull out hammers from their handbags, and smash. Every shop window shattered.
That sends a message.
They escalated to arson. They burned down empty buildings, railway stations, and cricket pavilions. They cut telegraph wires, and they even attacked art and museums. One woman, Mary Richardson, took a meat cleaver to a famous painting of Venus in the National Gallery.
She attacked a painting? Why?
She said, I have tried to destroy the picture of the most beautiful woman in mythological history as a protest against the government for destroying Mrs. Pankhurst, who was the most beautiful character in modern history.
Wow, that is dedication. And the government's response was brutal.
It was a police state response. There is one event called Black Friday, November 10th, 1910. The women marched to Parliament. The police were ordered to physically drive them back.
And it wasn't just arrests.
No. For 6 hours, the police beat the women, kicked them, and sexually assaulted them in the crowd. Many of the women sustained permanent injuries. 2 women died shortly after from the trauma.
And this is what led to the hunger strikes.
Yes, when the women were thrown in prison, they realized their bodies were the only weapon they had left. They refused to eat.
We touched on the force feeding earlier, but I want to emphasize how medicalized and cruel it was.
It was treated like a medical procedure, but it was violence. The doctors would shove thick rubber tubes down their noses. Sometimes they would accidentally put the tube in the windpipe, causing pneumonia. It was repeated day after day.
And the Cat and Mouse Act. That sounds like a psychological thriller.
It was the government's way of avoiding martyrs. If a suffragette starved herself until she was about to die, they would release her, let her go home, recover, and the second she was healthy enough to walk, arrest her